Hi, YouTube people. Um, we should go around and say if we did the reading or not, and like how much of the reading we did. I watched all three videos, and I have some notes too. But this is my first education session I'm leading, so obviously I watched the videos. What about you, Mikey?
I did not do the readings. I didn't know we had readings. I fully thought that we weren't doing an education session until 6:55 for some reason, even though I knew that was false.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll catch you up. We'll catch you up. What about you, Gabe?
I did all three videos.
Nice. Did you like them? Did you have any problems with them?
I didn't have any problems, no.
Yeah. And
Although I did watch the first one on like 1.5 speed.
yeah, that's understandable. I didn't like that there was an ad read,
Yeah.
but I skipped through it and yeah. What about you, Caitlin?
I watched all three videos. I did watch them at work, so I was multitasking, so I probably didn't get all of the information,
Hmm.
but I am like very personally interested in the subject, so I think that I have a little more knowledge, I think, so I
For
think I'm
sure.
good for a discussion.
Okay. And for Mikey, just to like, I'm just gonna recap all three of the videos real quick. So the first one, was about the book that we had talked about a couple weeks ago, Why Women Have Better Sex Under Socialism. It was just a summary of that book. I didn't want to sign the actual book because there was nowhere that we could access it for free. So I didn't want to like task people with by making them pay like $10 to go get a book. That's weird. But um basically he talked about how during like the Soviet Union, women were able to like finally like get jobs and be a part of the labor force, and it was making Western states like uncomfortable because people were like seeing that women were like getting more from their governments than they were in these capitalist states, and that's why like more capitalist states started like women's suffrage and women entering the workforces because they were like losing the battle against socialist states, which I thought was funny. And like generally women were like better off in terms of just equality and bodily autonomy. They were no longer like dependent on a man to like live, so they could leave a relationship if they weren't satisfied in it, which is like kind of unheard of before this, because if you literally can't live without the income of your man, like you can't leave him,
Yeah.
which is obviously sucks. um One thing I this the first video kind of touched on a little bit, the like shortcomings of liberalism. Oh my God, liberal feminism versus Marxist feminism. So like it talks about how, oh, it was great because women were finally equal in men in terms of the workforce, but that's kind of not the right way to go about thinking it. Like you women are already part of the labor force, but in unrecognized ways in the in
Yeah.
capitalist society, right? Because they have to like childcare, housework that 99% of the time goes unpaid for. So like now that they're entering the workforce, it kind of I don't want to say that it was like identical to like corporate feminism where the goal is just to exploit somebody else, but this time you're a woman, so it's okay.
Yeah.
But it's more focused on like everyone's getting security and stuff equally.
Yeah. And
Um,
obviously, you know that like working women work,
yes,
like
they be
working class
working
women have always worked from the beginning of time. So, women
mostly
are already part of
unpaid
the
for,
workforce. Um,
unrecognized work. But I think that there was the second video that we watched covered what I just talked about very well, where it was called like, you call it love, we call it unpaid labor, where it was a Marxist theorist who based she her whole thing, I guess her whole point was that under Marxist or under communism, women would the labor that women produce would go recognize, women produce the workers. Without women, there would be no work, there would be no anything. Oh, hi Daniel. I didn't know you were joining us. We've already gotten started, but I'm just recapping the videos. Um, yeah. And then the last video that it was by Dr. Wolf. I don't know how y'all feel about him. I think he's pretty cool. He was talking about how under capitalism, it gets to the point where people can't use their body to create work, so they sell their body. That only ever exists under capitalism, and it has existed since capitalism has existed. And so, ideally, Marxist theorists have like asserted that that would no longer be the case because, well, does anyone want to say why? Like, I feel like that's the video that I kind of was like got lost on a little bit. If anyone else would like to like recap that last video.
Well, I guess I don't know if this was the point that he was making specifically, but I
Yeah.
imagine that the point he was making was that under communism, you don't have to work for uh, living the living
Hmm.
things, and so you don't have to worry about doing sex work. And also, if women can like enter the workforce legally and like a normal job, and they have equal pay and this kind of thing, then there's no pressure to join the sex trade because like you can just get a normal job,
Yeah.
or a non-sex job.
He also,
Uh,
sorry. He also talked about how like there are people whose job it is to organize the sex work of other people, and he's like that it doesn't need to be organized like that, and no work needs to be organized like that where one person has control over the other person's bodily
yeah.
autonomy. It just that's not gonna fly. Um, what else from the other two videos, Gabe or Caitlin? Was there any like big takeaways that you got from them? Anything that like stuck with you? Oh, Daniel says the Soviet society experienced far less prostitution post-socialism, even though it was decriminalized. That's true. The first video did talk about that a little bit. Um, it was banned. Prostitution and pornography was illegal to do, so there was a lot less rates of it, which was nice.
That was one of the things I took away, I think, from the first, maybe it was the first video. I'm not sure if it was the first video or the third video that there was less pornography
Hmm.
because there was less like drive to create like profit off your body. In like what was it? East Germany. And just overall, like I think there was a number that was like 80% of East German women worked. And then it was only a fraction of that of West German women
Hmm.
who worked. And so there was kind of um I don't know, I thought that was interesting that there were a lot more women in the workforce and there was more of a like I guess women as part of the collective, which didn't really exist in or wasn't really emphasized in capitalist society.
Yeah. Another thing that that kind of reminded me of was that apparently East German men were starting to get a little bit upset at the changes that were being made because it was like not like they were like, oh my God, our old family structure where I benefit, like it's gone. They didn't really like that much. They also didn't like how since women for the first time ever could like safely leave a relationship, the men actually like had to be good, like they had to be interesting, they had to be good partners, or else their wife would leave them. They like there were tons of men on record saying, yeah, we don't like this. We wish it went back to the old times where and I don't know. I thought that was kind of beautiful. I like to see a man upset. I don't know.
I feel like we're going through that like same like a very similar process in like our current cultural zeitgeist that like more like middle class, upper class men are like, hold on a second. Women are at an equal economic status to me, and I have to be not a fucking asshole.
Yeah, have to be a decent person to get a wife these days. God damn it. No, yeah, I thought that was good. And they also didn't really like that now they would also have to take on a bigger role in housework. That was another thing that they didn't like. But I think that they eventually did. I don't know. I might have gotten that wrong, but um call back to manifesto. Oh, wait. Daniel says, call back to the manifesto. It is the capitalists who keep harems, the socialists free them. Yeah, this is true. That's an well, never mind. Let's see what else I have written in my notes. Oh, I meant to ask this at the very beginning, but did you guys just like that the format of this education session where it was like only videos, or do you prefer reading or what?
I know I prefer videos or audio. It just makes it
Hmm.
a lot easier. Um, Rather than reading. I mean, I'm okay if it's if you have a document that's there is an audio version, it's fine. I'll sit down and read it. But it just makes it a lot easier when there is like an audio version or a video because then I can just listen to it kind of in the background or, multitask and things like that. And
Good to know. Um, let's
oh,
see.
and then what some of my takeaways were that
Mhm.
the what I found interesting is the impact changing the economic system had on society values. And like the second video for sure touched a lot more on it is the idea of marriage and how that changed within a socialist and communist system. And so I
Mhm.
just find it interesting that now that women were freed economically, it changed the whole dynamic of relationships. And the first video talked about how women were then more satisfied in relationships because then they had more freedom. They weren't so much of like, oh, I'll stick with this one guy because he has the paycheck, and he can
Mhm.
support me. Well, now it's
Yeah.
like, oh, well, now she has the ability to earn a paycheck and has just as much rights and economic value, and so she can dump this guy and go, look for someone different.
Yeah. I feel like all around it was more beneficial. They did say that divorce rates were much higher in the East than they were in the West, but also marriage rates were much higher in the East than they were in the West. And also like women's satisfaction in their relationships and similarly men's satisfaction in relationships were better in the East because it's just it just is generally better when everyone has an equal opportunity to make money and that you're no longer a slave of a slave. So like you depending on a worker makes you like yeah.
Yeah.
Although it just seemed like the second one was getting awfully close. Like, don't get me, I'm like, you can have whatever type of marriage you want.
Yeah.
But when she started saying, like, almost like love doesn't exist or something like, or it just said the way she was kind of defining marriage of like, the only reason why people get married is for the economic reasons or something like that. It's like, I mean, two people could just want to get married, it's like,
Yeah. I mean, I definitely think that there's a lot it's very common for people to get married for the um what word am I trying to say? The convenience and not necessarily because they're head over heels with that person. But I mean, it definitely, yeah, it's not like 100% all of the time. There definitely are people that are in
I
love
feel
under.
like I feel like the thing there is that like obviously there are incentives like just to get married, but the specific person that you might marry is maybe influenced by your like emotions or whatever. But obviously, you know, obviously
Mhm.
there's like some kind of love even under a capitalist society because like, you know, capitalism is trying its best to eradicate it, but it has not yet succeeded. And under communism, that
Mhm.
will just be, more fully expressed.
Yeah.
One of the
I
things that you
also,
said, oh, sorry.
you're good. You're good,
One of
Caitlin.
the things that you said earlier that I guess kind of thought about is you said that divorce rates were higher, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I
No,
think it's
it's
probably
yeah.
a good thing to
Yeah,
like be
no.
able to
Like
get divorced.
women, yeah, they were leaving men that were treating them right, and I think that's great.
Hmm.
But
Or
um
vice versa. Or vice
but
versa.
yeah, yeah, or vice versa. Um uh, Daniel says the question we need to ask ourselves: what if the ritual of marriage had no economic or social incentives? Would less people do it? Love might exist, but abolition of the family might affect how permanent we perceive those relationships, good or bad. Yeah, I don't think that like I feel like marriage contracts when they very first started, they were simply like what it says, like a contract, like a exchange of two things. Like I know there's like tons of societies where like a family will have to like give some of their like crops that year or like 60 of their cattle so that their daughter can go get married to the some man. And like it's I don't know, it's a
A dowry.
yeah, yeah, that's thank you, educated king.
Yeah. I
Um,
think we could actually see what marriage might look like without the like familial and like social obligations when we look at like gay marriage, especially like in the pre-gay marriage being legal era.
mhm,
Because like even in like the 70s and 80s and like back before it was normal to be gay married, it's not even really normal to be gay married right now, even though it's legal.
mhm,
But um, but like before it was legal to be gay married, like gay people were getting into relationships and like getting married and like having marriage ceremonies and this kind of thing. But like obviously not all people were doing that. And it was always like I don't know like the statistics obviously, but like it was, not the norm. There was a much like broader range of relationships that like weren't tied to uh familial um obligations because like the opinion of everyone's family was like maybe you shouldn't be doing that. But
mhm.
like other than that.
Well, I think part of it too is marriage is just use the term marriage to define a whole bunch of different things, like the idea of like civil unions versus like a religious marriage ceremony versus like a commitment ceremony and things like that. And so I think if you take out the economic and other benefits out of it, other like the idea of having a contract between two people, would happen a lot less. I saw that personally when I was in the army of like people were just marrying each other so they can move out of the barracks because as soon as they got
Mhm.
married, they got a house. Uh, and so it's like when you take those type of incentives, yeah, you'll take that way, but you'll still, I feel like if two people want to be like, well, we want to be committed to each other in some sort of, relationship, socially, emotionally, and everything, they might have like a commitment ceremony or something along those lines. And so I
Yeah,
think the idea of that, the more general idea will still exist no matter what. But
but
then, yeah, maybe the contracts and stuff, if money isn't an issue, you don't really need to worry about inheritance and all this kind of stuff, tied to marriage. So,
I always figured that like I mean, I always thought it was like kind of silly that the state gets involved in your relationships at all. But I do imagine if there was no marriage, if there was no like economic incentives, yeah, people would just like naturally want to spend their life with somebody else. But you don't like that the government doesn't need to know that you're doing that necessarily or like keep tabs on like how it's going, I guess. Yeah, I agree. Um, I
I do
just got
think,
to oh,
oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
I
No,
do
you go
think
ahead.
Mikey made a good point. And one of the things that I think about is like queer people who had like relationships before like gay marriage was legalized. And I don't know. I think about a lot of like, there were a lot of queer writers at the time that actually said, like, we shouldn't be fighting for gay marriage because that is simply, like you said, a recognition from the state that,
Uh-huh.
also informs like kind of a form of, heteronormativity, like
Mhm.
one, kind of union that fits you into the family structure. And that instead we should be fighting for things such as, economic equality, ending sex work, healthcare, which I think are things that like socialism that and communism would fight to address that maybe would take away from the family structure and how we would perceive those relationships, as Daniel pointed out.
Yeah, I think it like all boils down to like liberalism versus socialism or communism. It's the same thing they talked about in the like two of those videos where like yes, liberal feminism can be good at some points, just how like advocating for marriage rights for gay people, I guess, can be looked at in a good way, but it's not really fixing the material conditions of anybody's life. It's just like a little bone that they can throw at you.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And it like folds you as a gay person into the system of family because once you as a gay person have an interest in being married and the superiority of marriage over other relationships, then you'll have an interest in defending that against people who would like to say, well, actually, marriage is an economic benefit, and it isn't actually about, always about love, or, it's about these other things. And you'll see that as a criticism on you instead of seeing that as a criticism on the institution of marriage.
Hmm.
Um, Before you're folded into the institution of marriage, you're like, well, fuck marriage. What the fuck does that got to do with me,
Hmm.
Yeah, I
You're
guess you could
you're
argue
cutting
that.
out real
Oh,
bad. I just want to say that.
oh, me? Or,
No, sorry, Mikey. No,
oh,
you're good. Go on.
yeah, I was just saying, so maybe instead of fighting for marriage equality, then it should have been getting the state out of marriage in the
Yeah.
first place, and being like, okay, yep, the government doesn't have anything to do with marriage anymore. So now you can have any type of relationship you want.
Hmm.
But but the only thing I could kind of see, but since the fact that we are still in a capitalist system, I still see some issues coming up with like again with since there is such a it makes a contract between individuals, and so like things like health insurance and like visiting people in the hospital, it's like if friends and family can visit you, well, how do you prove that, and having, rights to help people, so it's like there's still some stuff there, but
Yeah. But it's all just
yeah,
like
But
tied
obviously,
to the system.
obviously, these are the things that you wouldn't have to worry about in a socialist
right.
system. So yeah, like abolishing marriage like right now would not work. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't make any sense. But like it would make sense in a different society.
Yeah. Down the line.
One thing I wanted to add about like things that you may not have to miss in a socialist society or whatever is a comparison between the US and British system, not because Britain is in any way socialist, but rather this is something that I think is kind of independent of economic systems on its own. Uh, One thing that I've noticed is that they have a lot more legal structures for setting up legal representation for those who may not be able to represent themselves properly.
Hmm.
So they have this concept for children called the appropriate adult, which exists independent of whether or not that child has a lawyer. So that appropriate adult is literally basically a social worker that is meant to represent the legal and well-being of the child in any of these proceedings. And so it's something that like could be incorporated in most governments or societies or states and would be really beneficial. Would also disrupt the need for like parents having to be the sole decision makers over child medical needs or legal needs or things like that. So when you start breaking up the family in the sense of like having legal structures for all of that, um, families can more freely associate, and then we can have more independent systems of representation that are, still useful without having to require like, the contract of marriage to support.
Mhm.
Yeah. Did does Engels talk about that in that one writing at all? I was going to like try and assign some of the what's it called? Whatever. You know what I'm talking about. But
Same
it
property
seemed
and
way
state.
too theory heavy for me. I was like, I don't understand this.
Yeah, I mean, it's an 1800s exposition
Like,
of centuries of anthropology. It's not an easy read.
I
no.
mean, the anthropology is still fair. I read like a little tiny bit of it, but and a little, I know a little bit of the summary, but like the anthropology is like still pretty cutting edge for like today. Um, and like anthropology, that's basically like the position of anthropologist has not super changed from what he was saying back then, which is kind of crazy when you know all the other things that anthropologists were saying in the 1800s that are full of shit. So
What do
anyway,
you like? Do you like have anything specific? Like, what do you mean?
just like the general understanding that like marriage is a um that like society evolved and agriculture created marriage and created the like inheritance and that kind of stuff. Like just generally that is like taught in history and anthropology classrooms. So his like basic structure is like pretty uncontested.
He was right on the money.
He was right on money.
I love that.
Yeah, one other thing you maybe want to add from, private property, family, and the state
Yeah.
is essentially in these situations, Engels and Marx write in their letters and stuff about how the abolition of the family is like all about, it's almost a red herring, if you will. It's like that all of these capitalists want to focus on, and the bourgeois, socialists and whatnot want to focus on the abolition of the family. How dare they rip the family apart? And like Marx and Engels are just cackling in their chairs because they're like, no, we spent all this time explaining why capitalism is so messed up because it's the thing that separates us. And they like see the world of, economic freedom as one where you get to like genuinely choose the way that your life goes, and that
Hmm.
includes with relationships. So that's part of why I posed that question earlier of like maybe not viewing relationships nearly as permanent as we did before. Where like inheritance is based on familial structures defined by the law and property passed down through generations. And they make an argument, Engels specifically makes an argument about.
I feel like Daniel was saying something about something.
Yeah, I
Well,
was just explaining that like property relations mean our family relations have to be super like rigid and legal. And Marx and Engels are making a very specific argument throughout their works about the family, where it's like generational wealth, if you cut that off, changes the dynamic of like free association and freedom broadly. And so things like divorce happening more often is definitely not a problem because honestly, like, you know, there is a society in which like you could argue that it would be ideal for like kids to have, caretakers that are like professional caretakers that they still like love and appreciate, but they don't have to be like their biological parents. Like not necessarily, or at least there's
Hmm.
some argument for that.
Yeah.
But at least in their time, they were just making the basic argument that like, yeah, bourgeois socialists and like capitalists alike are defending the family only on the grounds that it maintains their ability to like hold property and hold that social status over others. So if we abolish that, we actually have more freedom, not just in our relationships like between genders, but like also in all kinds of association.
Hmm.
That reminded me of something. I have not read that, to be clear. This is just my own thoughts. But I think that also makes it easier, like the whole phrase, it's like it takes a village to raise a child, that like under um socialism, under communism, it would be easier to raise kids because of you as a parent aren't having to be forced to go immediately back to the workplace. You've got a social system to allow you to take a step back, take a break, allow for family members and other people that aren't necessarily family members, like Daniel said, to help you raise your kids. And, the way that capitalism has kind of forced this like strict structure of, two parents to raise a child, and, without a lot of help. I mean, some obviously do have help, but the lack of, paid um, parental leave, um, and other like I'm thinking like childcare, are
Hmm.
very difficult, makes it difficult for even women to like just participate in social life because they become caretakers.
And I feel like it's worth mentioning that like the reason that people don't see this now under capitalism is because they are not going to give you paid time off to take care of your baby because they don't care about you as an individual. They only care about making profit off of you. So like the longer they give you for maternity leave, that's all they're really thinking about is how much they're losing in profit and they're not getting their labor from you. So without the incentive to like maximize profit, it would just be generally better for people who have recently had kids or people who just like know kids to like actually have a good family structure that's doesn't have like an intense weight over it to
yeah.
survive.
I also want to talk about how bad, like obviously the construction of the family is bad generally, but it's also bad like specifically for children because
Hmm.
obviously the parents are in a place of domination over the child, and the child has no legal rights and no recourse to physical abuse, emotional abuse, isolation. We can see in our current political environment that a child associating with any adult who is not directly related to them is seen as a threat to the nuclear family structure. A child associating with a teacher, you can see this through the homeschooling movement. A child talking to like strangers has been completely like absolutely not. If you have like you would never know in our society, you don't think of approaching a strange child at any time, at any place, because like you know, what are people going to say? But
Stranger danger.
realistically, they're just like another human person that should be equal to all other people.
Hmm.
I I see this though, like don't get like I think this is an interesting conversation, but it leads us down to the rabbit hole of eventually like what's the purpose of biological parents? You know, is what makes them unique is are they unique at all in the first place when other people can fulfill their role and stuff, which is definitely true. I definitely think like you can adopt children and everything like that, and have multi-generational families and things like that. But then, it just goes back to you follow down this kind of thought trail, I guess. It's kind of like, well, then where do kids come in play in anyway? What's the point of having kids if you don't raise them? It's all kinds of weird, thought thing.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, I see that. Um,
I mean, I
I
do
don't know.
Yeah,
probably think, oh, sorry, I didn't know. I do probably think like this is less philosophical, but I do think like under communism there would probably be less kids because of a
Mhm.
like more access to contraception, less drive for profit. So, you don't have to have a bunch of babies in order to like sustain, the constant drive for, more money. So I do think
Mhm.
like there would probably be less kids in general.
Yeah, and I think the incentive to have kids, it was mentioned in one of the videos that we watched. The reason, like, states want people to continue to have more kids so they have more workers. Like, so I think in a socialist setting, the country would adapt to the less amount of workers. They would just like, okay, we don't have that many workers, we don't have that many people to take care of. Like, it's just, I feel like it would naturally work itself out
yeah.
and also be
One
better for the planet.
True. We can think of the ecological argument, but even one sort of like pro-natalist argument actually for communism or socialism is just how it bears out in societies that have sided not with neoliberal policy, but rather with just like generally social programs, right? We know that when parents receive just more support for raising children, they are more likely to do so. There are plenty of anecdotal examples about companies that provide extra family leave as ones that have some of the highest like child raising and like birthing rates and things like that. So I think that there's a strong argument to be had, and I think it may bear out in Soviet Russia and also potentially Cuba, but I'm not 100% sure, is that part of this is like there will always be some kind of equilibrium, right? That like we can't have more people than production can sustain, but also that maybe growth is, terminally unsustainable. So like at some point, yes, we are going to have less kids, but I think the kids that we will have will be so much more satisfied with their lives as a result.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be either pro or anti-natalist or anything like that, but it's just you see it with some countries where you could I don't want to say like a overproduction of children. I mean that's totally the wrong thing to say, but
Yeah,
it's like
Birth rates.
yeah, but yeah, there's a I'm trying to think of where surplus of children is also bad,
I
but
would
it's
say like just an unsustainable
yeah,
population growth.
yes.
Yeah, like
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much. Unsustainable population growth. And then there's other countries that have the opposite, where
mhm.
they have unsustainable population
population
decline.
decline.
And
Yeah.
so it's like there's got to be like a middle, and so then how is that equilibrium achieved? But I guess that might be an entirely different conversation. So
I would say what Daniel said, like support, child support, um, access to contraception. So like if you don't want a kid, you don't have to have a kid. And if you do want a kid, you're going to have the support for the kid. Ideally,
You
is
think of the amount of people right now that are like, I don't want to have a kid, it's so expensive. And if
yeah.
you like didn't have to, you know, in socialist in the USSR, you had childcare was subsidized, school obviously, like food. They tried to socialize like kitchens and like cooking and house cleaning, in like especially the early USSR, and then they kind of like were like, maybe we can give people kitchens, but they had like public cafeterias and all these kind of things, which kind of took some of that child raising burden of like feeding 15 children off of people. And what happened is that, the birth rates went up in like Russia and China, after socialism. Obviously, like it's not totally, maybe not entirely like socialism that did this, because like obviously they were had like feudalism before, but I think that's but also we still see in socialist countries that like population and the birth rate is a very, very important issue. Um, it is still a thing that is very much on the minds of the government, because it is a production issue. So the USSR was always trying to encourage women to have more children. Um, even though that like sounds weird to us and it sounds uncomfortable to us because we live in a capitalist society where like children are not valued and workers are not valued, in a socialist society it makes more sense, because you're trying to build a socialist society, and if those children are supported by social programs and that kind of thing, then it makes sense to have to it can make sense to encourage people to have kids. I can't remember where I heard this, but the thing that like in like East Germany or maybe in Russia, that there would be girls who would like be in college, like in maybe like 20 years old, like in college, be going to school, but because they were like nurseries, like in the university, they would like be having kids at like very young ages, but like still going to school or going to work, because there would be nurseries in the school or their job. So, and we would think that would be really weird, because we would think they'd be like ruining their lives by having kids that young, but they had the support to do that.
Is it a generally like Western thing nowadays to like if you have a child at a kind of young age, like it's irresponsible just because you don't have enough money to? Like I
I
feel like in
just
other, sorry,
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead.
I just saw a video about that this morning.
Oh, you
This,
did.
to be fair, this was on like Instagram Reels, so I can't give the validity of any of these statements. But well, it was just two people on a podcast talking about like the way that capitalism has forced us to like think of our 20s as purely working. Like
Hmm.
we have to work now in order to make the money to be able to have kids. So now like people are having kids a lot later in life. And so now the like kind of standard of having kids has moved up a lot more, because of this like constant drive to keep working, keep making more money because having kids is so like financially difficult for people. So I do think it is definitely a thing that people are having kids a lot later. And it's also kind of why people think it's irresponsible. I do think there's other reasons, other factors and why people think it's irresponsible to have kids early, but definitely finances is one of them.
For
And
sure. Yeah.
obviously we can also be like, if you're like a 20-year-old mom in East Germany, you don't have many of the same pressures that cause neglect and abuse in the capitalist USA, because your child is going to be fed and they're probably going to be in daycare, and you're not worried about the food, or maybe you're not worried about your partner being abusive or this kind of thing, because you're in a really. So I think that and in you would probably have had relation education in relationships, and maybe in child raising techniques. So I feel like there's so many things that make it a completely different situation.
That's a very good point. Love that.
I I also feel like with social, like what I kind of learned from the reading that Mikey gave us a couple weeks ago, or yeah, was that 2 weeks ago? That like I feel like in socialist societies it's a lot more of a like choice too early on if you want to have kids, because I feel like a lot of our perception is that if you have kids early on that might be an accident or you weren't educated enough, especially um like this is kind of a side thought, but like poor people who have a bunch of kids because like they can't really go out and do expensive stuff. So what's like the cheapest activity you can do? It's having sex. And so a lot of young couples have these like big families, and also like have a lack of education about contraception and birth control. And so like a lot of the socialist countries like Cuba provided sex education in schools, and also gave access to abortions and birth control. So I think I don't know this for sure. I can't like give a statement whether or not, but I bet it would probably be easier to have a choice earlier on in your life because of that education.
Mhm.
Yeah, I bet so. Well,
Yeah, I know I can speak from kind of semi-personal experience in that my parents, I was an unexpected child, and
mhm.
the expectation after I was born or, was that they would get married, which they did. And then a couple of years later, they got divorced. Um, and then also my mom was in college when she had me. And so she's told me stories about going to class when I was a little kid and, you know, bringing me into the classroom and stuff like that. And it's like, that's just a lot of expectations and obligations for someone so young that they should have the support, for them if they choose to, keep the child. So,
Yeah, because like daycare, I don't know how much it is, but I know it's so expensive that people would rather like they would rather bring their kids along, even though how inconvenient that would be, it's better than paying whatever daycare fee there is. Which it would be so nice if the university just provided a nursery, uh, but that's not how things work in capitalist societies because it's not profitable.
Yeah, it's interesting. Daycare didn't used to cost anything. It usually just costed, someone else's time. But like that was a person who appreciated your existence and also had the free time and resources to be able to help you raise that child. I mean, like, of course, the village raises the child. It's the destruction of communities spawned by capitalism. Destruction of communities from in neoliberal individualism, from the idea that we should all own our own homes in as like wealth building opportunities, so we move all the time, either from the affordability crisis or from separation because of wealth gaps and investments and generational wealth and those kinds of things, so we stratify ourselves rather than building thriving communities. And so all of our sort of production for building up what a family can be is so focused these days, and for much of capitalism, on your ability to build wealth that can never compare to what billionaires can do, and chase that ideal, that like we literally lose the very things that made having children like possible even in extreme poverty and serfdom in feudal times.
Hmm.
mhm.
Like the way I think about it, if you like approach someone in like feudal Britain, hey, I want you to pay for childcare from your like neighbors. Like when you need the kids to just go somewhere else and to like so you can go to the shops or take care of something, you know what? You actually just have to like pay them for that. Like
Yeah,
you have to give over like half your salary to make sure that that they can be watched for a day. They would look at you and scoff. They'd be like, "That is
yeah,
the most terrible idea. Whoever thought of that?"
I agree. Because I feel like it's just the way that it naturally would should go is that like you birth this like new member of your community and then everyone else in the community is just like obviously just going to take care of it because it's a person that can't do anything for itself, and you shouldn't have to pay for that. But I'm preaching to the choir, obviously. But
Maybe an uncommitted person is watching this on YouTube.
yeah, maybe we'll change their mind.
But I do agree with what Mikey said earlier. I do think kids are very oppressed. I do think, and we don't really think about it. We don't really like acknowledge the oppression of kids in our society. Like they have
Oh,
so few rights.
and the fact that like you have to wait until you're 18 to access most of your rights, but like I don't know, for like I mean 12-year-olds know what's going on and they're treated like they are stupid and they don't have any opinions, their opinions don't matter. And I
Mhm.
don't know, those are people too. So
I've taken a parenting class, like it was like a summer, like 2 week actual parenting class that I got credit for, college credit for, just for the fun of it. And it was very interesting learning about the different parenting styles. And we had
mhm.
to take quizzes to see like what type of parent we were and everything like that. And it seems like most people, at least here in Kansas, are more conservative, where the parent is very much in control of the child, and there's a lot of, like, the child needs to give proper respect and do what the parent says, that sort of thing. But then the professor said the correct way, studies show, is that it should be more egalitarian, and that, yeah, the parent has more knowledge than a child, but when it comes to like decisions and how the relationship, it should be more on equal footing, and you should try to, as soon as the child has the cognitive ability to make decisions and understand things, you should like have conversations with them and discuss things and have it on equal footing. So
I think the reason that that parenting style is so popular, the like conservative, do what you say, is because like that parenting style like prepares people to become workers eventually. Oh, the meeting's gonna end in 10 minutes, like, by the way, guys. So, um, but yeah, there, that parenting style just like, it's just, um,
It bakes,
working,
bakes
but
the
like
fascism
the
into your life.
preseason. What'd you say?
Bakes the fascism into your life.
Yeah.
One of the things I love noticing is how like political structures like fascism and imperialism like filter down into like person to person interactions, and like that thing where like the parent has control over the child. Well, obviously, if you try to exert your pressure onto another person, they're going to rebel against that no matter what. We see this at the government level. We see this at the relationship between like the workers and the bourgeoisie, and we see this at the relationship between the parent and the child. And so, but if you just like give the child more rights and more ability to discuss and more freedom, then you lessen the conflict between those two relationships. So creating an egalitarian society between parent and child reduces that conflict that the parent is creating. And in the same way, socialism reduces the conflict of the class struggle that the bourgeoisie are creating by imposing their will on the proletariat. So, yeah.
Block it. That was really good. Well, I don't really have anything else to discuss. Was there any like closing thoughts anyone else had about the any of the videos or anything we talked about?
I do feel like we got off topic and we stopped talking about sex about halfway through and just started talking about children.
And that's
Uh,
okay. You know,
that's
the
okay.
conversation goes where the conversation
I mean,
goes.
that's how
I
you make children. So
True. They're one and the same.
Yeah, yeah. Um, maybe we'll come back to sex another time because I feel like there's a lot to be said about that.
The main thing to that takeaway, it was like 80% of women said that they orgasm every single time in the East, and like only like 43% of women orgasm in the West. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, that's hilarious.
I thought that was crazy. When I first watched that video, I was like, what?
Yeah.
Oh
Socialism is good
God,
for
that's
orgasms, I
great.
guess.
But it all ties back to like you have like as a man, now that the woman has like some sort of power, you have to like step up your shit. So
Yeah, it's so much fun. It's
yeah.
so funny.
I actually did see some stuff recently that was like about that dynamic of like men, you need to step up your shit. In part because it was definitely like a TikTok style argument. Like this is not, peer reviewed research. But I think it logically makes sense. It's the idea that essentially there's a bunch of undesirable traits in men that come from like centuries of learned patriarchy,
Hmm.
and that those traits are no longer sort of like selected for, in the sense of women having extra freedom or ability to choose means that they're not going to choose undesirable men or men with like terrible sideburns who also bark at them. Like this,
Yeah.
those are the like those are the kinds of things that you could get away with in like 1800s France that you probably can't get away with these days. And
Yeah.
so the claim is that these undesirable traits have existed for a long time, and that like society is progressing a little bit faster than maybe a bit of the genetics are. And so maybe there's some like genetic drift that's happening where these undesirable traits are like being particularly inflamed right now, but like soon enough they will start to disappear as as our social systems then pressure our genetics to kind of change in that way. And so it's just an argument about like, okay, bad men are not going to be selected. They will not have kids, and we will have less Andrew Tates hopefully in the future.
Daniel's doing socialist eugenics over here.
Daniel, I don't agree with the eugenics.
Woo!
That
Legs
I don't think
over.
it's
I don't
necessarily eugenics. I just
agree with
think
the
it's what's
eugenics.
happening, bro. Like, if you're a loser, nobody's gonna want to have sex with you. Like,
But I think that obvious because obviously like behavior isn't like genetic.
yeah.
Maybe sideburns are genetic, but like you can shave them off. Um, you know, so but I do think that like if better men are selected in like fatherhood, they'll raise better children because like they'll impart those traits through like nurture onto their kids. So
Mhm.
it probably shakes out as the same,
Mhm.
even though I don't
Well,
know.
it's kind of funny that, because it's socialism that would bring it to this point, but almost brings, sex into a marketplace almost, where then the guys could be like,
Yeah.
well, I provide a better relationship, I'm better in bed or something. You should, be with me. I'm better than this loser over here, that sort of thing. And so,
Mhm.
which is
It's
kind of a strange dichotomy of like, well, now you actually have guys competing against each other to be like, oh, well, I'm a better person than he does. I'll treat you better and things like that. So
Mhm.
Mhm.
So if you're a loser capitalist, join the YDSA and maybe you can be a better person, and then like maybe you might be good enough for these awesome socialist women.
Yes,
Okay,
that.
wait. I have a
Oh my God.
question. I know we only have 4 minutes left, but I just saw, I feel like we should debate this because I just saw it on Twitter and like 2 hours ago. That's like, capitalists see women as private property, but communists see women as public property. I was wondering if anyone agreed with that statement.
This is already in the Communist Manifesto. The address is in the Communist Manifesto.
It really?
Yeah, it says like the bourgeois consider women as public property. They have wives and daughters of the proletariat, and they can't even so that they also have each other's wives that they sleep with. So how can women be private property when they are already public property? It was like under communism, women will be owned by no one. They're no one's property. That's in the Communist Manifesto. So it's already been debunked.
Hmm.
Mikey, you were cutting out a lot, but I got about half your statement. I got like 60% of that, but I understood what you were saying. I didn't necessarily agree with that Twitter statement. I just wanted to hear what people's opinions were.
I think that definitely there are leftist men who are misogynists who probably, I mean, that statement probably applies to them. But I mean, there was a quote in one of the videos where it's like, um, what was it? Like, women's liberation cannot exist without socialism, so socialism cannot exist without women's liberation. So, like, socialism or communism done right, I don't think that women would be viewed as public property because people would, like, I don't know, have better decency. But maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, maybe they're just not property at all.
Yeah,
Perhaps.
maybe
Yeah.
they're just people.
Women are not property.
Hot take.
I think.
I think this discussion went well, even though it did get derailed quite a bit, but those are the best ones, in my opinion.